away from the WordPress thing that I have, and so I've got to learn how to transfer everything I've got on one to a different website, which is the second time this has happened, my third website at the school. I keep changing it. So if you ever need to see these videos, want to go back, you can just go to my channel on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and type in JCS Balloon and just click on my channel, and then all my videos will be right there. JCS is my initials. Balloon is the stuffed animal penguin that I sleep with. All right. Oh, that's on film. All right.
I can't tell if you're being serious or not. I think he's
being dead serious.
I'm absolutely serious. When I was in the 4th grade, I had appendicitis, and my dad was going to Vegas, and the doctor was like, he's not going to have surgery, he's not going to have surgery. So my dad felt really guilty. And the guy was like, go to Vegas, he's not going to have surgery. So Dad went down to the gift shop and bought me a little penguin about this size. And he gave it to me, and there were balloons in the room, and I called it Balloon. And then the next day, so he went to Vegas, and then later that day they had surgery on me. Aww. So it was the first time, yeah, my dad was in Vegas. But anyway, I had Balloon forever. I mean, I took him to college with me. I took him to Europe with me. I've stabbed someone over him before. You can imagine that my friends in my fraternity got a big kick out of this. Well, actually, when we were first together, she was like, "It's either Balloon or me," and I said,
it's like 10.
And I said, I've known Balloon longer. You're gonna have to be okay with Balloon. Well, Balloon didn't talk to me. So anyway, but my freshman year, a friend of mine, you can imagine, you guys, you know what guys talk about when you're with each other, and you can imagine what they said they were going to do to Balloon. And I had this friend, when I was a senior in high school, I stocked shelves at a grocery store. I had a box cutter, and I took it with me to school for whatever reason. And I said,
because you're male.
And he was like, I'm going to fill in the blank to Balloon. I was like, if you touch my penguin, I'm going to stab you with a box cutter. And he was like, I'm going to blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'm telling you, if you, like, I'm going to do this. And he grabbed Balloon, I took a box cutter out, and I jabbed it in his leg. And he goes, you stabbed me! And I was like, I told you I was going to do this. Whose fault is this? Mine or yours? I told you I was stabbing you if you touched Balloon. You touched Balloon, and now you're bleeding. I mean, it was through his jeans. It wasn't like I shivved him, in the jugular or something. I took my box cutter and I stabbed him right here through his jeans, and he definitely got cut. I didn't have stitches or anything, probably, but... So anyway, do what? It was my dorm room.
You want to restart your phone now? Yeah.
I just won't put this on YouTube. But I probably will. But when I went to England, I took Balloon with me, and the night before I left for England, they had a going away party for me, and they got Balloon and they submerged him in water and then stuck him in our freezer because penguins like it cold. He weighed like 80 pounds. And I took him to England with me on the plane, and when I got there, all my clothes were wet, but Balloon was dry. And I took every hostel I went to, everywhere in Europe, to Amsterdam, hostels in Amsterdam, all of it had Balloon. And one night, I got so used to having Balloon with me that when he would leave my arms, I'd wake up. And he was perfect size. And I woke up and I looked down, and the guy on the bunk below me in this hostel in Scotland, he was on his bed. And I'm a pacifist. But you ever have rage and you do something before you realize what you're doing? I got so mad, I jumped down at 3 in the morning, and I was like, the guy had fallen asleep, the balloon just fell off the bed. So I was really mad. But then we were on vacation, Kennedy had just been born, and we were leaving the hotel real fast. We went halfway to Edisto Beach, we got up and we were leaving really early, and Balloon didn't get packed, and I lost Balloon. For 2 days I could really talk, but now I got Balloon Junior, so I got another Balloon. My wife bought it for me because I was really sad.
That makes me so sad.
My whole family is in this. My dad loves basset hounds, and he's like a grizzly old man, but he has a basset hound stuffed animal on his bed called Beauregard.
Oh,
yeah.
Beauregard, yeah.
So, all right. That's why it is JCS Balloon, embarrassingly enough.
It's so depressing. It's so sad.
Is it sad?
Yes.
I wish you would finish the story.
My mom, it became such a joke in my house. My mom, when I was in high school, got those like blank white t-shirts and put balloon, like drew balloon on them, like a life-size balloon from here to here, colored it in. It was real ghetto looking. And she thought I would just like sleep in it. No, I wore it to school all the time. I had one big one, I had one with a little balloon on the lapel, and I had one with a balloon right here on this thing, and I wore it to school all the time. My friends were like, really? And I was like, I'm representing. You know.
That makes me really happy.
Well, no one knew. The only people who knew why I had it were my friends, and they were so embarrassed to tell other people that they associated with me
They
about
didn't
it.
want to be associated with it.
Yeah, so no one. The reason I didn't get dates with girls was way beyond balloon. It was, yeah, I had a hard time talking to them, and
You should have like transformed him into your other personality and used it to talk to girls for you.
Like 10.
like that. No, I did when I went to go watch Ted. Kelly knew that I was going to have a strong connection with that movie, and I laughed. That's as hard as I've laughed at a movie since The Hangover. I was so happy the whole time. All right, now let's talk about the sit-ins. Sit-ins are a successful strategy for the civil rights movement because of the juxtaposition that they show. There were department stores all over the South, well, the country, but the South, department stores also had like little kitchen lunch counters, and black people were allowed to sit in the South at these lunch counters. And there were 4 students at, I think it was North Carolina A&T, which is a historically black college. They decided one morning, on a Sunday, they were going to go to this lunch counter. And they were either going to get served or they were going to get arrested. And this is important for a couple reasons. But the biggest reason is this. At what point do you get your freedom and your equality?
When you demand it.
When you make the decision that you don't care what happens to you, but you will get it. The minute that they think they deserve it, and that they will get it or else, that they sacrifice everything, at that moment they're free. They're equal. Right? So they walk there and they sit, and they don't get served. And they keep on sitting. And they keep on sitting. And they finally get arrested. But what happens in response to this is really interesting. It sprouts sit-ins all over the South. And you have people literally, some sitting at a lunch counter, other people sitting at on the floor, right? Like in sit-ins. I'll see it. I'll try to find the most famous image of a sit-in.
Pretty sure they said that's the way to sit in.
Pretty sure the counter was in one of the museums.
Oh, absolutely. If you go to the American History Museum in D.C., they have one of those. I'm actually going to show you one of the counters that wasn't just that one, but I'll show you some of them here in a second. We watch some more stuff. And it's going to sprout this. And one of the things that you'll see when you see the video or see the image of it, a lot of time it's peaceful people, and not always black, sometimes white and black, and they're peaceful. And what you see juxtaposed to them is hatred and anger, right? People dumping stuff on them or yelling them, sometimes even hitting them. And what you see is peaceful good versus anger and fear, and then you put bad on it. And now it's going to be on TV, and these pictures are going to be around the country, and so people who are on the fence, people who might not be Southern, or who might be on the fence in the South, it creates an emotional reaction. That's why Dr. King thought nonviolent resistance was so important, because it creates in people an emotional reaction. Now Malcolm X is going to find it to be different, and we'll get to Malcolm probably later this week or next week, but he saw it differently, and you can see it from both perspectives, both of them. Malcolm X always said the best thing that ever happened to white people was nonviolent resistance, because it allowed you to hit a black kid and nothing ever happened to you. But Martin Luther King said it was an emotional response, and TV was playing into this. And the civil movement became really important. So this is like essentially the early parts of the civil rights movement. Brown versus Board, Little Rock, SNCC, SCLC, nonviolent movement stuff, sit-ins. And then obviously in the 40s, like Jackie Robinson and the Army, and then World War II with some of the money stuff. Okay, so there's that. We're going to finish up the 50s Cold War today and tomorrow, and then we'll get into the 60s civil rights stuff. Okay, so let's talk about the Cold War, and now that Eisenhower's president, remember we talked about those two Secretary of States, George Marshall and then Dean Acheson, or D. Acheson. One of also the most famous Secretaries of State is a guy named John Foster Dulles. In fact, if you fly into D.C., they have two airports. The one that's domestic is called Reagan National Airport. You know what the international one's called? Dulles. It's this guy. Actually, this guy is his brother. He was Secretary of State. John Foster was. His brother Alan was head of the CIA.
So that's like a really scary kind of like combination.
That is a big, big deal between a family. The Kennedy brothers at one time were president, attorney general, and senator.
Like a Super Bowl. That's what's going to happen with me and my little brother. He's like, well, how would you cheer for the one? Head of the CIA and I'm the president, so.
I would just cheer for my favorite kid. All right.
Kennedy, yeah.
Yeah.
Poor Reagan.
That's not true. All right, so now we had containment, right? Truman's policy of containment, all the things we did to contain the communists. John Foster Dulles thought that containment was an immoral policy. What do you think his argument was when he was persuading people that it was immoral?
That it's not going to really stop communism because you're not doing anything to get rid of it where it's at.
While you might not have communism grow, you certainly are allowing it to exist. And massive retaliation is going to be the new policy for a while, although we're going to see it not have a great success. And sometimes it was called brinksmanship. What this means is, any time that the Soviets or communists do anything aggressive, for example, like the Berlin Airlift or whatever, something like that, anytime the Soviets or the communists try to take 1 inch of land, we will wipe them off the map with nuclear weapons. That is what massive retaliation means.
Obviously, it didn't work.
Now, to deploy this, what we had, the Air Force started changing the way it looked. We might get to this. Oh yeah, it's right there. The new look military. Right, that makes sense that I put it there. All right. Good job, 2002, Corey.
Yourself pat on the back.
Right. Back when balloons.
I'm sorry, that makes me so sad.
I was smarter then.
Like, I really want to, like, I don't know.
I miss him. I really do miss him.
It makes me a little depressed.
Junior's okay, but
I hate that. Like, when you do something and
stuffed animals, like, smell a certain way after.
Kelly hated Baloo. She said he always did handstands in her back because he was like not like really, really squishy, and so sometimes I'd leave him there and she'd roll over and he was like this. It's just like, get rid of this thing. I'm like, I've known him longer. What the military decided to do was sort of change the way it dealt with stuff. Our military had been focused on having large amounts of what's called conventional weapons, having lots of troops. Well, to deploy a policy like massive retaliation, the Air Force becomes a much bigger deal. The Air Force used to be part of the Army. It was called the Army Air Force. After World War II, it became its own branch. And there was this military organization called SAC, S-A-C. It stands for Strategic Air Command. Who's ever seen Dr. Strangelove? Has anyone seen Dr. Strangelove? It's awesome. It's really funny. It's about nuclear holocaust. If nuclear holocaust can be funny, you know. It was done by Kubrick. It was a Kubrick film. And I oftentimes will show it to you guys after the AP exam. It's really funny.
is it better than Space Odyssey?
Yeah, I mean, it's the actual name of the movie is Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. This is what it's about. What SAC was we had B-52 bombers that flew 12-hour missions just outside of Soviet airspace, right? And then every 12 hours, a new B-52 would come and replace the other one. And we had, bunches of them in the air at one time, all around communist airspace. Not in it, obviously, it'd be a violation of territorial integrity. And on each one of those planes, I had mentioned it the other day, each one of those planes had more firepower than every bullet or bomb dropped in the whole of World War II combined. They were all holding thermonuclear or hydrogen weapons. And each one of them had 3 different targets. A primary, a secondary, and a tertiary target that it was going to drop if it got the go code. That was how they were going to deploy massive retaliation. Dr. Strangelove is about a general who went crazy and gave the go code even though we weren't at war. But what this does is bring into reality nuclear war, right? This is the new look. And it's pretty scary. We're going to see this policy be pushed and see if it works soon. But one thing that's really important, is always on the test, and it's also important just for today's world, is Eisenhower, about the time he left office, what president did we learn about that gave a really, really famous farewell address? He pretty much followed the policy for 120 years.
Washington.
Washington's farewell address. Right. Eisenhower gave a really interesting farewell address that people still quote today. Political scientists still use. What he saw was, as the military had gotten bigger, and we were getting these huge companies like Boeing and these companies to supply us with weapons and missiles and everything, that they had become really powerful in Congress. And he called this the military-industrial complex. And it was Eisenhower, and remember this, Eisenhower was a 4-star general who was head of NATO. So it wasn't like this guy was some hippie who went to Cal Berkeley who wears Birkenstocks and doesn't comb his hair, right? This is Dwight Eisenhower, and he said, be wary of the military-industrial complex because eventually it will overpower our government and it will have the government make decisions that it's not comfortable with. It will influence our decisions. The military and the combination of military and industry will become so powerful that it will be dangerous. What do you think about that?
Sounds
really
reasonable.
progressive.
He's also been correct. We keep making nuclear weapons even though we have enough to, blow the world up 6 or 7 times. Why do we do that? Because these companies that make these military goods make so much money, they give so much money to politicians. Democrats and Republicans, no one's innocent of this. And they give it to those campaigns to keep them winning, right? What happens if you run for office? And what happens if there's 2 candidates? There's, Mary Lee saying, I think we should cut the defense budget by 20% and take that money, and we could literally give every kid in America a 4-year education, which would pay off more taxes later, we'd be richer.
People lose their minds.
Attack ads would say, Mary Lee hates America. Mary Lee is in bed with the communists. Vote for Mary Lee if you want America to be taken over. And you'll see some picture of a soldier that's been shot and say, thanks Mary Lee, I appreciate it. And you'll see a picture of Mary Lee shaking the hand of some soldiers right with an American flag in the background. Who do you think helps sponsor those ads? Corporations, right? Super PACs. That is what Eisenhower was talking about. They didn't have super PACs back then, but they did have corporate money in politics. He was worried about this. Yes.
Wasn't that an issue in the last election? Because I know some people that I talked to complained a lot about that because they worked in the defense field and they're trying to take away my jobs.
It works every time. In fact, one of the most disgusting times, one went against a Republican and one went against a Democrat. This was in the year 2000. I've talked about this before. In 2000, George Bush, who never fought in Vietnam, was able to paint John McCain, who was, what John McCain was, a war hero, right? He was in a prison for 6 years, refused to leave the prison until all his men were let out first. Because his dad was a famous admiral, they were going to let him out early, and he refused to leave. He can't raise his arms above his shoulders now. And George Bush painted him as being anti-patriotic because he wanted to slim down how our military looked. He was painted, and who ended up winning the election? George Bush did. same year in Georgia, there was a man who was a Democrat who was a triple amputee from Vietnam. He only had an arm. He had lost both legs and an arm in a, I think he had fallen on a grenade or something had happened, right? Sniper, whatever. And he was painted by the current senator of Georgia named Zaxby Chambliss as being unpatriotic for wanting to do some of the things that were more progressive about this. And guess who ended up winning? Zaxby Chambliss, because the guy, the triple amputee, was seen as being anti-patriotic. Zaxby Chambliss never set foot or never walked or was never in the military. So that is what he's talking about. Money can paint anybody to be scary, right? Before the Iraq War, people thought that one of the reasons why we're going to war in Iraq was because of 9/11. But Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing. But enough money was spent to contain that as, you know, get people kind of confused, and then we're going to support the war. Why are we going to war in Iraq? Well, because of 9/11. That's real.
And then you can't argue against that because if you do, you're a terrorist.
There you go. Then, well, you don't. Well, maybe he didn't know what would happen. And I was teaching during it, so I remember it. I would tell my kids, now you might not like Iraq. I might not like Saddam Hussein. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't go in, but it's not because of 9/11. Saddam Hussein had nothing to do with it. And what they would always say is, well, you don't know that. And you can't say that for sure. That's what everybody said. And then the Bush administration put out some things like we think there might have been a meeting in Czechoslovakia between members of Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein people. Well, that weren't really real, but there was enough speculation to get people, you know, off the argument. There you go. So Eisenhower was right. Now let's turn our attention to Vietnam. Now this isn't the Vietnam War, but we're going to be in Vietnam for a long, long time. Door open. Oh, thank you. I guess I should stop this. It's probably been like 40 minutes.